Yeehaw, hello, howdy. Keep everybody on the toes here by accidentally changing up the music midway through, pushing the wrong button, being able to do all those fun things. Hopefully, the rest of the podcast does not have any of those technical difficulties or anything like that. This is the Canon Stats podcast, the weekly Arsenal Analytics podcast. I am Scott Willis, and as always, I am joined by my co host, Adam Bogey. Welcome, Adam. This is just how things are going in my life right now with things breaking and doing all that stuff. So, of course, it has to go and happen here. Hopefully, your week has been better.
Yeah, no, it's been a not a lot of stuff has been breaking anyway, so that's good. Life can be challenging. So if I were you, I would have just played that off as like a mashup, like some kind of remix. DJ
I
Scott.
am apparently a DJ.
Yeah.
I think my greatest achievement and thing that I'm most proud of in life, besides my children, because I'm obligated to say that, is the music that I made for Stats Guy and a Civilian. I'm kind of embarrassed by how long I spent doing that and being able to do it, but I think it turned out quite nice.
No,
Yeah, I should I should do some fun remixing for this music too to get us some fun vibes. Be able to do it.
you should. You could be a rival to like Gunner Blog and JJ Bull and some of those other guys who make funny songs about
Yeah,
soccer.
well, I'm never going to be quite the DJ that Andrew Arsblog is, but maybe I could be like the second best Arsenal DJ.
I mean, we probably do have like real professional DJs who are Arsenal fans, so maybe
No, they don't count.
they don't know. This is only the leisure set of DJ Arsenal fans.
That's correct, right? Yeah, I don't count those guys. Those guys are probably good, and they're not going to make funny songs. They'd only make
Yeah,
serious
they're
music.
making bangers for the club.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, can we say bangers for the club? When was the last time I was actually in a club? It's been a long time.
Ooh, yeah, probably even longer for me, and I'm younger than you.
All right. Enough waffle. I think we got some fun to be able to talk about today. So we are approaching the quarter season. There is no real good quarter season mark because of 38 games, but we are at the 24% mark of the season. And if we wait till next week, we'd be beyond the quarter mark of the season. So we're going to call this the quarter mark of the season. And we thought it was a good idea to do a checkup on how the team is doing. So we got a couple sections here that we wanted to go through. So we're going to go through the biggest surprise, the biggest disappointment, the main takeaway, has our expectations changed, and then we're going to do a final rating of the manager out of 10. So let's start with some good news. So Adam, who's been your biggest surprise so far this season? I think let's set the mark again here from the baseline of the season. Where you thought at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there have been some positive surprises. I think that what I would say about positive surprises, though, is I don't think that there's been one that's been well beyond what I expected. Like nobody who I was like, they're going to be like whatever, and they ended up being really good. I do think that but the kind of the good inverse of that is I think that there are a number of guys who have been better than I expected. I certainly, although people didn't love his game against Tottenham, I think that Eddie Nketiah has been a really positive player so far for the season. Not always getting the goals, but like against Crystal Palace, I think he was a big reason that Arsenal won that. Drew that penalty and was big in the season opener too. So um, obviously, like Declan Rice has almost had like no adjustment to
Mm-hmm.
what he does, and he's been incredible. I would also put Alexander Zinchenko as one of my surprise players of the season. I think that recency bias maybe would quash some because I don't think he was good, particularly at Chelsea. But I think just overall he's been better as a defender. Continued consistency is like that midfield ball progressor and like that line breaking pass launcher.
Mm-hmm.
And just it's been really fun to watch the way that he's kind of even become more free roaming this season. I feel like maybe that's just uh, anecdotal.
Yeah, you're right because I think last year you think like when you were the normal setup would be kind of the back two, maybe back three, hybrid back three, and then it was Party on the right, Zinchenko on the left. But because Declan Rice has had that natural tendency to want to drift to the left hand side, we've seen Zinchenko all the way on the right hand side
Yeah, like
even
playing right
more
wing.
than we did last year.
Yeah, it's been crazy and ridiculous. I mean, I was picking out moments against Chelsea where I was like, "Oh, look at that! Zinchenko's in front of Rice, who's not even like the nominal number 8, or not even the number 6. He's the number 8 this in this game, and Zinchenko's still in front of him." There was a good portion of that game where when Rice was almost dropping to left back, so that Zinchenko could get forward with Martinelli. It was kind of crazy, but yeah, I mean, those guys are kind of like the ones that I think have exceeded my expectations the most. I think given all the talk about Saka, you would think he's doing worse than he is. But I think we'll get into this in like the second segment, but we just haven't had a chance to like see most of the guys play the full part of the season so far.
Yeah. When I was preparing for this, I wrote down here that this is my topic or the topic, and then I was trying to make like a list of players that were a big surprise, and it's not a long list to be able to do it. Actually, mine is blank currently. It feels like there's a lot of players that have met expectations. I think a part of that is that we had big expectations for a lot of players. The last year was the one where the expectations rose and the surprises came.
Mm-hmm.
And this year it's been more one where I think that the expectations have changed and there's only time to go down here. I think I would call out William Saliba as well. I think there was potential questions of how a back injury could have affected him going forward, and it hasn't slowed him down at all. He has certainly moved up my ranking of the best center backs in the world to where I think that he has a good argument to be among those players. Certainly among one of the best in the Premier League right now. So I think that is one that's been a positive surprise. Not that we thought that he was a bad player or anything like that, but I think we had potentially questions of, what would that injury do to him to start the year? So I think that has been a very good positive surprise. Um, I'm a little bit. This isn't necessarily a positive thing, but I think that I'm surprised that Arsenal did bring in a goalkeeper. So I
Yeah,
think that might go into some of the other stuff we're going on. So that was not necessarily a position that I think a lot of us had in mind as a spot to change, and that's something that even when the season kicked off, I don't think was on the top of our minds as something that happened. So I think that is certainly a surprise, not necessarily negative or positive, but something that has certainly surprised me and has made a talking point for the team that I don't think we anticipated at the start of the year. I
no,
want to go back to what you said about Eddie Nketiah, and I think that's one that's got a lot of meat still on the bone, and it's a constant conversation. I'm going to pose this question to you: do you think Eddie Nketiah is an above replacement level player? So if Arsenal had just say taken anybody from say like the bottom 3 teams or the bottom 3 or the top 3 teams in the championship, do you think we would have a better player than Eddie Nketiah? So I think to me like that's kind of like the prototypical replacement level kind of guy.
I would say no. Um, I mean, who's his competition here? Like Lyle Foster, and I wouldn't take those guys over at Eddie and Ketty. I think you need to get, and this is the thing. This is the thing that kind of just it grinds my gears. Maybe one of these days I can do a segment about like like football fan fallacies that, or at least things that I think are fallacies, or maybe things that I can disprove. I don't know, but I just there's a huge grass is always greener uh, like element to football fans.
Mm-hmm.
I just tweeted the other day about Rafael Leao, and like last December, January, like people were like, "Get Martinelli out! Like he's not good enough. He's not title race standard." All this stuff, and people were saying Rafael Leao is better. And Rafael Leao is a great player. He's probably one of the top 3 or 4 left wings in his 20s in the
Mm-hmm.
world. But like the standard is he better than Gabriel Martinelli? And to me, even amid like the bad form that he was going through, I didn't think that was so clear. Many people thought it was, and here we are now, 10 months later, and I think it's been completely flipped on its head. Like he is not he's now started 18 games in the Champions League, and this isn't just against like Bayern Munich and Barcelona. Like he started games against like Dinamo Zagreb and stuff like that, and he's got 2 goals in 18 games. Gabriel Martinelli just made his debut and he's got 1. So it's interesting. Martinelli also scored 15 in the Premier League, which is the most difficult league in the world, not Serie A. So that's kind of the point that I'm making here is I think that the standard that you get held to as a player you already own is so much
Hmm.
higher than a player that you could acquire. And it's kind of ironic because ultimately, like when you're doing the calculus, you have to say, is Eddie Nketiah better than 30 million pounds and Lyle Foster? Because in one situation, or sorry, Eddie, in one situation, you have to spend to get the other guy. So I think that you could put Eddie in probably like solidly halfway up the table, maybe just outside of the table, like maybe Aston
Hmm.
Villa type of a team, and see little to no drop off overall.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one with Aston Villa. Right, they have Ollie Watkins, who's a player that I've always admired. I still have some skepticism about if he could be like a top striker, but I think he's a very very good player. And I think that might be an interesting kind of for Eddie Nketiah. I still keep coming back to like Eddie Nketiah is very hard to make a determination on. And I think there's a lot of discussion that's been kind of going around with him weekly too now. With does he make enough impact as a substitute? And I think that there's just not a lot of minutes as a substitute. I think he's maybe like 990s or so about 800 minutes in there, and this is going back basically his entire time with Arsenal. So it's over multiple seasons,
Small sample.
and the numbers like are still good. And I think a lot of it is just down to like the finishing. He had a bad run of finishing last year, and I think that has certainly changed the narrative about him. And like just one or two goals in sub appearances absolutely make up people's mind. And I was also kind of looking here like the amount of time that he's come on where the team is winning, and we're looking to just kind of like see the game out. He's there to get extra legs, run around, do some pressure. I know his Sevilla performance kind of rankled some people because his running around included a kind of lazy foul, being able to do that, those kinds of things. So he's kind of a weird player that is certainly kind of a Rorschach test. I don't know how to say that one right, so I'm just gonna kind of mumble through it, where people can kind of project things onto him. I feel like I do it as well, where like on one hand, I feel like he's not as good as some people say when we're trying to sell him, but he's not as bad when people are kicking him to the curb,
No.
and saying that he's worthless and being able to do things. I think he's like a weird guy that is kind of both things at once, right? He's not good enough for Arsenal, but he's also this massive asset that if somebody was coming to buy him, we should get a lot of money for. He kind of is a little bit of everything right now.
Yeah, I mean he's not like let's be very blunt about this. He is not, regardless of what some people might say, how many followers they might have, and how loudly they say it. He is not get this man out of my club, Rob Holding standards by any means. He to me he is closer to Trossard on the bench than he is someone like Holding or maybe like Jorginho, for example. Like I don't think that.
I think he's probably in a similar level to Jorginho.
Yeah,
If Arsenal hadn't had the injuries, I think he would have had a similar minutes profile to what Jorginho has done.
probably. Yeah, and that's the other thing is I think that there's like a floating out there conspiracy theory that Nketiah's got all these minutes to start this season because Arteta believes in him too much and because blah 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 blah. But like, I mean, Gabriel Martinelli just missed 6 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks
Mm-hmm.
with his injury. Jesus was out about that much time. Like we had,
And he's going to be out again.
and yeah, going to be out again for a couple weeks, and Eddie probably is going to get one or two more starts. Like deal with it. He's the next man up. That's just what
Mm-hmm.
teams do. Like if I don't know if Yves Bissouma gets injured for Spurs, like they're going to start Ollie Skip or something. That's just what a backup is. He's not as
Yeah.
good, but
But that's why he's a backup.
that's the other thing that I think gets really jumbled in this is that just the constant like harping on this backup needs to be better than he is. But then like today, Arteta goes to the podium and says these two guys who might be starting games otherwise are going to miss a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and now there's a panic. We don't have starters. We don't have starters. This is a squad. This is a squad. Oh wait, that guy's out. Oh no, we are. Season's over. Well, which is it? Do we not have starters? Do we have a good squad? Do we have guys who deserve to play? Or do we have 11 guys who can win the title? I think you need to make up your mind, because you can't just say that there are a couple of these guys that are not good enough, because from where I sit, Eddie Nketiah has come into the team 3 seasons in a row. I think I even said this last week, 3 seasons in a row, and the team has not fallen out of its position for having a backup consistently starting.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, he has inspired like really good performances and wins in big spots at Old Trafford, or sorry, no, Stamford Bridge, against Manchester United last season,
At home, yeah.
and like this season, Crystal Palace was one of the best guys off the bench against Fulham. Like all this stuff when other guys have let the team down. So you know what? Is he good enough to win Arsenal a title starting all season? No, but that's not his squad role. So why do we care? Is Emile Smith Rowe good enough to win a title starting all season? No. But does anybody hold that against him? No. What about Fabio Vieira?
It's one of the
You know,
it's the benefit, the backup quarterback part right here, where when you're not playing, your stock goes way up,
yes,
but then when you are playing, especially when you are an actual backup, people do remember why you are a backup. I found myself kind of surprised with the reaction to the Smith Rowe cameo against Chelsea, because I didn't think his performance was memorable.
no,
If anything, I thought it was almost a negative, and kind of doubled down my impression that he's not a midfielder. I certainly feel he's a wide forward, maybe even an inside forward, and I think that that's something that people will just kind of get blinded, I think, by some things. And I know I'm not going to say that I'm blameless. I certainly have my own blind spots and things that drag me in. So let's switch here to another wonderful topic of biggest disappointment. I think there might be a couple choices in this one.
yeah,
I'll give you first crack at just pick one of your biggest disappointments.
yeah. And this is, I mean, I want to elaborate on what you said a minute ago about expectations. I think it's been a lot easier to think about disappointments, like you said, because they're so high. Like,
Yep.
who would you say is the biggest pleasant surprise at Manchester City? Like,
There isn't ever really one, right?
has anyone exceeded expectations there? Has anyone disappointed? I'm sure you'd have a lot more material if you're a City fan. So, kind of along those lines, I mean, to me, it's fairly obvious. I think the biggest disappointment is probably Martin Odegaard.
Yeah, that's what I've written down here
I
too.
think that he was doing fine, maybe even like bordering on good coming
Mm-hmm.
into probably Chelsea, bordering on good with man, he didn't do well enough against Tottenham, is what I would say. But then I think he just really did not play well against Chelsea. Um, and then he was just kind of like taken out of the game completely against Sevilla. And
Yeah.
I think that maybe that was a strategic choice by Arteta to play up the left, because Arsenal did like pretty significantly play way more up the left than up the right against
Yeah.
Sevilla. But I would just say in general, even though he's scored some goals and all that good stuff, I think that there's just like a certain incisiveness that's not been there in the final third quite so much for him, and he's always been kind of a flow based player.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily surprising that he can hit a rough patch of form, but it's kind of like what you just said with Smith Rowe, but the opposite. Like they're just, and this happened to Ramsdale and happens to Nketiah every third game that he starts. Like some people are just waiting to say that he's not good, and then they get some stuff to cling on to, and you get like the AI Martin Odegaard ghost on Twitter and all that good stuff. And I'm just like, he's the captain,
I do
guys. He's
love
gonna be
playing
fine.
with the AI image generators. That's I played around with it today in the
I
newsletter.
saw that.
It's always fun to be able to do it. So I don't blame anyone for creating it. So I was looking at the numbers this morning, and it's interesting. Like if you compare it to the 21-22 season, I think he's still playing better than that. But this goes again to like where we're setting the baseline, and it's like that 22-23 season. I think a lot of people wanted that to be a new baseline, a new level that he had hit, rather than like him maybe like we don't know this now, we won't know this for another 2 or 3 years, but it's certainly possible that that might be his best ever season, and he may never reach those same heights again, at least not as the same overall kind of level. but I think there's certain points where I think we'd like to see him be able to come closer to it. But it is interesting kind of seeing here. So, shots are up from 21, 22, but they're slightly down from last year. The main difference is where he's shooting from. He's back to something closer to what he did in 21, 22, with the average chance quality actually even down a little bit further. And, I think if you had a couple big chances, I think that would certainly
Yeah,
help him
he'd be on.
overall being able to do it. Where he's playing is also more towards where he was previously. The big difference, though, that I'm surprised in is like his middle third touches have dropped significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So he still has the same kind of presence really deep in the defensive third, being help pull it out, but he's not having the same middle third touches. I think that's something that when you replace 2/3 of your midfield, that you have to expect that there's going to be knock-on effects for how things are going. But the penalty area touches are up from 21, 22, but down from last season. The dribble numbers are back to kind of where they were previously. Maybe he's losing the ball a little bit more than what you would like, but it is just kind of interesting that how the one really good, maybe even a career year, kind of changes our expectations for it. And I don't think it helps that, he got the big contract signing. So now the expectations are kind of set at that level. And, he's the captain. So maybe people have more expectations on him. But I think it's fair to say that it's been a disappointment. But I think that, maybe how much of a disappointment is going to be the interesting question. And it'll be good to see if he can come back from it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there are some things to what we've seen from him where it's like there will be a rebound. Like I refuse to believe that he's like a .08 XA per 90 player. He never has been. That's like less than half of his career total. So
Yeah.
I think that there are some things that are very obviously going to bounce back. He's
on that point, on FBref, if you go on there, so they have two different measures for XA. So there's the standard XA, which is the shot assisted expected goals, and then there's the ones that try to measure more of like an expected threat type, where like the passes that you do into the penalty area, what are the probability of those turning into goals? And he has a pretty large gap between his passes actually turning into shots and his what you'd expect to be able to get from those. So that one, it's a 0.08 for the shot assisted XG and 0.14 for the actual what you'd expect from just the passes.
more
So
like
it's
expected.
and in the past those have been much closer. So last year it was the exact same, where he was about 0.23 for both.
Maybe there's something to that, because I wrote, I think 2 weeks ago now, about how he was still very high for passes completed into the penalty area.
Yeah, I mean, it is down from last year. Don't get me wrong, but
He
it's
was
not
coming
down
from
to
a
the
very
same
high number
extent.
already.
Yes, yes,
And that's very true for there's like a mosquito, for the club as a whole, though, too, is that like if you were to just put someone blindly on FBref and sort passes into the penalty area, you'd see Arsenal are high, and you'd be like, oh, they must be one of the most, like, the biggest volume creators in the league. And then you see like their 13th, it's probably different now, but 12th in NPXG, and you're like, oh, that's weird. That's suspicious. Kind of the opposite of Newcastle. Newcastle are like very much mid-table in terms of making those pass completions into the penalty area, but they're like first or second in XG right now. So
yep.
it'll be, this is only a quarter of the way through the season. We got 75% of just the Premier League to go, 76, I guess. And probably, hopefully, more of the Champions League too. So I think, we tend to treat these things like week by week. And it's almost like a therapy session. Like, the way it is now is not the way it will be forever. So we need to remember that.
Yeah, so I think the other one that I had on my list for biggest disappointment, and I think it would be remiss to not bring it up, is potentially Kai Havertz. So this is one that I've been called a Kai Havertz apologist, or propagandist, for being able to do it. But
Very low
I
bar for
think
that.
if you go back and actually read what I wrote when he came in, I always had a little bit of skepticism about the transition, right? Because this is not something that we saw him do in the Premier League. I could see the vision of why you'd want to do this. You're betting on a player that has this pedigree and was did this, but there was always the questions. I think one of the other questions that I had was that everything that we'd seen positive from him was on the right hand side, and now we're switching him to the left hand side. So I think there's some of these questions, and I think the answers right now are pointing towards it hasn't quite worked maybe as well as we hoped. I don't think it's worked as badly as some people say, but it certainly has not done the transition like a Declan Rice has had a transition here.
No, definitely not. And I mean, the Kai Havertz discussion has frankly just become very, very boring. It's we're beating dead horses like left and right when we talk about Kai Havertz, because I think that, like you said, like people, if you can read and comprehend what people are saying or what they had said when that signing happened, I think there's just such a huge difference between really boosting a signing, saying, "Oh God, I'm so excited about this. This is going to be awesome." That's what we did with Declan Rice.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wrote that 105 million isn't a value, but who cares? Basically, was my column on Declan Rice.
And maybe it is a value now.
Yeah, maybe it is. But like people have been really bad at confusing that for what I think a lot of people who are maybe a little bit more even keel, like you and me, and I can think of a couple other people too, on Kai Havertz, saying like, no, they're not only signing him to play as a number 9. We're not signing a third number 9. Like this is what they're going to try to do with him, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to help like understand and explain that. Like I don't agree with everything Arteta does, but if I try to like speak to why he might be doing it, that doesn't mean that I'm apologizing for him. It's just the discussion of why did he do that. That's all. So I mean, go back in the pages on this very blog, you'll see I gave that deal a C when the window closed. I think basically people expected him to come in and do what James Madison has done at Tottenham,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not really. I mean, first of all, they are nowhere near the same player. Like they play like nominally the same position, but that's where it ends for me. So it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, clearly he's taken some time to adjust. I think the pressure is definitely weighing him down. Uh, he started off stronger than he's been in the last couple of games, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So the
I
numbers
think one of the
kind of come
things
back down a little
that's
bit.
kind of complicating things is that we've run into a string of matches where it doesn't really suit him. I think to have played as a midfielder. I think if we were, unless like everything went absolutely perfectly with his adjustment and he was better than expectation, if he had been that big a surprise, I don't think that anybody, unless they were trying to score points, would have been saying that they expected him to actually start these games. Like, I think the expectation for Kai Havertz was to play these matches like that we have coming up against Sheffield, to be able to slot into those games, into the ones where we know we're going to have more of the ball. We need to figure out ways to break down low box and to be able to add additional options and threats to be able to do it. But I don't think it was ever really the plan for him to be in the biggest games as a midfielder per se. I think that is one where maybe we have another disappointment in that Thomas Partey, who we kept this year, like, hasn't been available for those games, because I think that was kind of the plan, is that in these big games when we need to control the midfield, we're going to, switch out and we're going to have Declan Rice and Thomas Partey, and we are just going to have an athletic midfield with technical quality that basically can go up against any team in the world. And unfortunately, in these big games, we haven't been able to see it. Like we saw it for that little bit against Manchester City,
And it was
and then he got hurt again, and it was really good. And it's like you could see, like, wow, this is nice. I really like this. So it's just really kind of unfortunate that the injury bug has come back to him.
Yeah, and truth be told, the injury was one of my other big disappointments. I think that no matter which way you slice it, it's been a poor injury luck first quarter
Yeah.
of the season. Um, Whether you want to call it luck or not, when you're talking about Party, obviously that's a big one. Jesus, I think this is the first time he's really missed any time with something other than his surgically repaired knee. So we'll see if he's really injury prone, if he picks up other injuries, right? But So it's
Yeah,
been
right. No, but you kind of look at the whole front line, right? So we've had, time
Martinelli.
missed from Martinelli, time missed from Trossard, time missed from Iron Man Bukayo Saka, and then
Declan
into
Rice
the.
even missed time.
Yeah, so it's been, thankfully it hasn't, there's only been one major injury, knock on wood, but it hasn't been kind to us. Thankfully it's the squad, I think, has really kind of picked up. So maybe that's another surprise, is the actual depth of the squad has been a very nice surprise, to be able to see people be able to plug in, step up. Takahiro Tomiyasu coming back from injury. I think we didn't mention him in the surprises, and I think he's been a very pleasant surprise, playing three positions for us this year. Very well, I think, being able to do those three
Just a
positions.
massive asset, just to have around. And I think he's still only 25. His contract expires, I believe, next summer. Or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, not next summer.
It's 2 years. Yeah, I think he's got
Summer
two more years.
25.
Yeah.
So he'll be 26 or 27. I don't know when his birthday is. I memorize that stuff. So he could end up asking for a significant amount of money, and I could see Arsenal saying, "Yeah, we want to keep you around as long as he doesn't have like another season where he's missing all the time." So yeah, it's I think there have definitely been some things to be disappointed about, but I mean, on that injuries note, like, it's so hard. It's so hard to know exactly what to think about what's working and what's not working. Because do you think the intent, for example, with Kai Havertz was to have him come in and start um, as essentially a left-sided number 10 behind Eddie and Kedia? Um,
No, I don't think so.
I
I
don't
think
I don't think
the
so either.
plan was to have the interchange between him and Jesus.
Yeah,
Because my whole thing that I talked about is that I think that Arteta saw Havertz as a midfielder who can do forward type of things, and I think that meshes well with Jesus, who's a forward who can do midfield type of things. And like, I just imagined the view was, you had Martinelli also switching sides, Saka free to switch sides, and it would just be a team that had constant motion and being able to fluidly move between the different roles. And I thought it would have been exciting. And it's unfortunate that, those guys haven't been able to play together for the long stretches.
yeah. I don't think we have a single game this season with Havertz, Zinchenko, and Jesus all in. And I think that a lot of that, like, positional.
Was that the one Champions League against PSV? Were all three of them there together?
Maybe they all play together. I meant start, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
I'm gonna.
it's interesting because I just think the system in general creates a lot.
Yeah, and yeah. So against PSV, we did see all three of those guys start together, and
They
that
did,
was
and
our
that was the
best,
best
most
output of the
fluent.
season. So
Yes.
there you
Yep.
go. I forgot that Jesus started that game, but yeah, it's been. I just feel like his system relies a lot on guys being a little bit unpredictable, and that kind of comes up for me when we have this discussion about should he try Zinchenko in midfield and play Tomiyasu at the back. I think part of the appeal of Zinchenko in Arsenal system is that the guy is supposed to be in the back.
Hmm.
He's a free man. He's an extra man. That's part of what makes him like a weapon. If he's a left eight who's playing in left eight positions, I don't know if that's like I just don't know if he. I mean, he's a great passer, but I just don't know if he is quite the weapon. And I said the same thing about like people who want to move Nuno Tavares to the wing. I said, yeah, you know what? Nuno Tavares is a great attacker for a fullback. End of sentence.
Yeah, I think that is a good way to describe him. He surprises you as a fullback to what attacking talent he has, but when you kind of compare him against other attackers, he looks like a fullback playing attackers, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. It sucks to have to say this a quarter of the way through the season, but I don't know how much we've really learned about
Hmm.
so many things. So it's gonna be really interesting to see, like, especially over the next few weeks with Jesus missing, with Party missing, kind of how Arteta uses the squad, like what tactical tweaks he makes. Will Jorginho continue to be the number six? Will Rice play number six? And if so, does that move Havertz to the eight, or does he want Havertz at striker? Because I mean, I think it's very true that Kai Havertz has in a lot of ways provided in some big games what people essentially think Arsenal need to buy Ivan Toney for.
Yep.
He has become the long outlet, and he does such a great job of holding it up. He's even created goals that way. So it's interesting.
Excellent. I think that gives us a good kind of segue into expectations and have they changed for you this year? I think I'm still in roughly the same spot, like where I'd like to see Arsenal challenge for a title, but with kind of the understanding that it still takes things to bounce the right way. I've been surprised by some of the teams chasing. I think Newcastle have looked really good. Liverpool have looked good. City maybe slightly off, but this, I don't know. Is it they having a slow start again because they did the same kind of thing last year and then turned it on in like they seem to always do? So I think the for me the expectations haven't really changed. What about you?
No, I think I'm a flat no to that question. But I think I also am probably a little bit more grounded in my expectations before the season, which is kind of ironic because I think that when we were talking about, well, Arsenal need to make the top four, and I was like, well, I picked them sixth, stuff like that. So it's about what I was expecting. It's last season would have been more of like way ahead of expectations, I think. But I
Hmm.
mean, I also think that we need to like look at what's going on and what happened last season and say, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world for them to be out in first right now. Like that does prove to be a burden for most clubs who are way out ahead in August and September, like that they end up bottling it, right? Like Spurs have such a fun reputation for that, being the August champions. And I think that if we're not first at Christmas, like is that does it really, like, who cares if they're within even 5 points of the top of the table? Like that's really good position to be in. That can change very quickly. So I just I feel very steady in my expectations, which are pretty much right in line with yours. I expect them to be one of the top couple, maybe three sides in the league, and really put up a tough fight for the league, and do well in the Champions League. And so far, I'm getting that. So
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, outside of one result in Lawns, Arsenal have been unbeaten. I think even the match in Lawns, I don't think it was a bad performance by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think there's been a situation or a match this year that I can really point to and think that that was we really got away with one. I think there's been some deserved draws, those kinds of things, but there hasn't been any ones where I came away feeling really bad about the team enough to really kind of change my expectations.
I think there have also been a couple of games where the deserved was completely the opposite direction, and we Arsenal did not deserve to draw to Fulham on balance. The mistakes were bad, but
Yeah.
yeah, and there. I think there are games where maybe the final margin was one and it should have been more, but.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you came to me at the beginning of August and you said, "Hey, 9 games into the league season, three into the Champions League and one cup, here are the clubs that you're going to play. Would you take one loss from this?" I'd say, hell yeah, come on. Of course, I'll take one loss from that. I'm not. I'm not one of these people who thinks that every game against somebody who isn't in the Premier League is like this is Emil Smith Rowe and Fabio Vieira in midfield tonight because this is easy work. There's a lot of it's actually a little bit ironic how much arrogance there is in the Arsenal fan base regarding the Champions League, considering we haven't even been in it for 7 years, and you expect them to go be able to beat everyone and everyone by multiple goals. So I would take this at the like people hate when you say that,
Absolutely.
but I would,
Yep.
and that's just perspective.
All right, next, let's give the manager a rating out of 10. I think this is kind of a hard one. He's had some changes that maybe he didn't want, the injuries that he's had to deal with. So, what are you giving Mikel at the quarter mark here?
I think that he's definitely missed some games. Set them up in a way that just didn't work. Take leaving Saka on for too long against Nottingham Forest, I think was the thing that.
Or the Bournemouth one too, right, where he left Saka on
Yeah,
where
sorry,
they
I'm
were
thinking of
3-0
Bournemouth.
3-0 up. Yeah.
Apologies to Bournemouth, you are not Nottingham Forest. And yeah, I mean, persisting with Party right back more than I would have liked, stuff like that. But I also think that he has overcome some additional Arsenal curses and demons this season through his own tactical acuity and ability. I think thought he set it up perfectly against Manchester City, which is
Hmm.
probably worth at least 2 or 3 points out of the 10.
Yep.
And like first, I mean, we never win in Spain, and he won in Spain. So I'd probably give
One
him.
at Goodison Park, right? We never do that
Yeah,
either.
never do that, and that one's busted too. I think out of 10, I'm probably like sitting at like an 8, and I think that there is some upward mobility there once he gets all of his guys, if it clicks a little bit more. Um, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a perfect 10, but I think there's some things to poke at where he's made some adjustments that, you maybe wonder if they've worked exactly how you want them to be able to see. We've definitely changed. I think there's a response to perhaps the end of last year where the defense really kind of let us down. So I think that maybe he swung a little bit too far into trying to cover for some of those frailties last year. I do wonder if the trade off for the security that we're trying to go for with some of this possession is worth the neutering of the attack that we've seen. I was looking at today where you see about the fast starts, those seem to have gone. Even though like we're having more of the ball, we're having more of the final third possession. It seems like it's a possession with a lot more caution. We're not looking to directly attack from winning the ball back,
Mm-hmm.
because the pressing numbers are actually up, which is something that might surprise people. So we are trying to win the ball back, just as
Really
quickly,
early now.
actually even more quicker. But we are not using that to create transitions because I think that's one of the things that he maybe is potentially scarred for. I might be projecting, but I think he has some scar tissue from last year of seeing people run at our defense a little bit too often, a little bit too much, too easily. So I think he's trying to accomplish that, and I think he's done well. The defense, outside of times when like the team has just like shot themselves in the foot, has been excellent. I don't think that anybody can really argue otherwise. I think we have right up there with Manchester City the best defense in the league right now, and if we cut out the mistakes, maybe would be the best defense in the league. So, and I think the other thing that maybe needs to get some praise is that I think we've given him a big squad with versatile players, and he's taking advantage of it. I think one of the things that's been clear over the last, like 3 or 4 matches is the subs have changed the game, and those guys coming on have given us something that we needed. And that's not something that people always said about Mikel Arteta. Like his subs were too late,
Too late.
or
Yeah.
the subs didn't change the game. And I think that he's been. I haven't argued really with any of the subs. Maybe outside of the Saka one, I would like to see him come off a little bit. But we all know Saka just plays forever to be able to do those kinds of things. So I think that's where I'm at. Yeah, that 7.5, 8 out of 10. Room for improvement, but I think he's been good so far.
Yeah, no, and I do agree with the notion that he has leaned more into the squad this season. I think that
Almost, not necessarily by choice, but he has used it.
yeah, well, I think sometimes it has been by choice. I think sometimes
Yep.
it has. Like for example, the decision to be using Jorginho in certain games
Mm-hmm.
like Manchester City, and Chelsea and Sevilla, and switching to Tomiyasu, which I think was a decision based on Zinchenko's form, but also like a tactical one. So it's yeah, I mean, like, is he going to come out and like have one random guy be in every game? Like, no, that's not. I mean, that's what you do in Football Manager and FIFA. That's not what you do in real life. Like West Ham just went to freaking Olympiacos with a rotated squad and lost in a league that they really need to do well in, by the way, because they're not going to make the Champions League from the Premier League. Um, Coaches do not like to rotate as much as fans do, so it's just something that unless you've got Ake or Gvardiol or Jack Grealish on your bench, you're just not going to like make 5 changes from game to game. But I think that he's been more flexible, and I think one thing I know that he was carrying for I don't know, probably a couple 2.5 years when he started was that he could only do it well once he started to play his football, right? Because obviously 3-4-3 to win the cup and everything. But he once he really started to play his football, I feel like a lot of people would say that he could only do it one way, and if Plan A doesn't work, he was done. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was just not gonna go well. But I think that we've seen a much stronger performance from him in that area because I think that like these little tiny tweaks, where Rice is playing in this game versus that game, even though he's maybe named in the same position, it is different. Or like or like, giving Tomiyasu the freedom to get way the hell forward against Chelsea, or sorry, Sevilla. Stuff like that. Like I think where he's made these little game to game tweaks, I think it has just gotten better.
Yep. So let's end this with a main takeaway from the quarter season, Mark. What's your main takeaway, Adam?
I think the main takeaway is just that I think there's just a lot left to figure out. It's just for injury reasons, for form reasons, for like building chemistry and relationships. I just think that there's a lot still left to learn about the team, and to if you were to list off like all of the adversity that Arsenal have been through at this stage of the season, and then even if you didn't list the adversity first and offered this position, I think a lot of people would take it. But then when you list like Zinchenko's going to miss games, Jesus misses games, Saka misses a game, and still be Saka misses against Manchester City no less, and you're going to be in this position, I think people would be very pleased by that. So it's gonna be interesting to see like what the club looks like in the 3-quarter mark versus the one
Yeah.
quarter mark.
Yep. I think mine is that this season is just going to be different than last year. And I think we need to let it go and stop making as many comparisons to it. And I know this is partially something me giving myself advice on being able to do things because, one, like that's the baseline, right? Like that's what, the natural comparison is to how things went last year. But this is a new team. This is a new season. We're trying different things and it's not going to be the exact same as last year. So I think that's something that I want to try to think about going forward is maybe doing a little bit less of the comparisons to last year. I think those ones are still going to be valid because like that's how we kind of are able to see change in things. But now that we're at the point where we are getting to a sample size that is fairly large, it is time to start looking forward and kind of making comparisons based on this year. So let last year go. It's a great memory, but maybe not over index it too much. So
Yeah.
I think that's for myself and maybe for other fans to be able to try to do as well.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I think there's been so little appreciation of the journey this season. Like everything has been so microscopically analyzed, and also just analyzed through the lens of 12 or sorry 22 20 22 23. But also I think just kind of analyzed through like the Wenger sort of DNA that the club has too. And we like to see really free flowing sexy football with a lot of goals, and we hate the horseshoe
Mhm.
and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, are they getting it done? Absolutely. And is it in any way unsustainable? Is there anything to indicate that this is unsustainable? And I would say no, there's not. Arsenal aren't giving up no goals on a lot of chances. They're giving up no goals on no chances. They're scoring few goals on fewer chances than last season, and that's sustainable. So
Yeah, it certainly is. So I think that's a good look back at the quarter season. So I think we got a lot of good stuff to look forward to. Let's do some housekeeping. So this show is supported by our very much appreciated premium subscribers. If you're considering that, we would give you our very loving appreciation. You get 5 additional articles per month, additional premium podcasts, and yeah, being able to do all that wonderful stuff is because of those guys. So Adam, Arsenal played midweek in Sevilla, so we've touched on it a little bit. Let's break into that a little bit here. So Arsenal put themselves in a very good position now to win the group. It was kind of a must win, I think. Well, maybe not quite a must win, but maybe as close as you can get to a must win before you get, or actually a match week 3, right?
yeah, yeah. Maybe a good way to put it would be it was a must not lose. I would say
Yeah.
to come out of that game with 1 point, I think would have been fine. Other than the eulogies for the season that we would have gotten from it. But no, I mean to be in first, point up on Lons, whom you've already visited, uh, up 3 on Sevilla, whom you've already visited. Eindhoven will be the very last game of this group stage, so
Yeah, the Eindhoven away match.
that will be basically, I mean, most likely considering the next 2 are at the Emirates, this will know our destiny by then. So yeah, I mean, listen, when you get an away match as an English Premier League club in the Champions League, like you get to see the full throat of like the fans, the full like the best version of their atmosphere. That's a game that those clubs really want to win. And I think that especially a club like Sevilla, I mean, all you need to do is look at their performance in Europe versus Spain, and you see that what matters to them, right? Because they do so much better in Europe. But all that said, I think it was a really good performance.
Hmm.
It was a little flat for parts of the first half, but you get sometimes you just gotta like in these Champions League games, you just gotta rely on like some individuals to make some great plays. Martinelli probably should have had 2 goals, but had a great goal, great turn from Jesus to set him up, and just some really good performances at the back. Got a little frantic at the end, but um, yeah, just to be able to walk away from that with the 3, I think is just really big.
Yeah, so I was looking at this, and 2 wins, and that guarantees Arsenal win the group. So that is kind of the goal here. Two home matches, and I think that Arsenal should be pretty heavy favorites in the next 2, right? So we'll have Sevilla at home and Lens at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are ones that Arsenal should feel pretty good to being able to make it. So we've been wanting, fans have been wanting to rotate so much during the Champions League. So let's take care of the business in these last 2. And then we should be able to rotate heavily for the last PSV match away. But you want to talk about Gabriel Martinelli? That guy, this is his first Champions League match ever,
Yeah,
which I was kind of surprised by because we're so used to Arsenal just being in the Champions League, and then we had the 7 years in the wilderness, and then we played 2 already this year, but he was out injured for him, so this was his debut,
yeah,
and what a debut from him.
yes. He was just, I mean, so good, and I thought he was probably the best attacker on balance for Chelsea too.
Mhm.
I think he's just come back very strong from his injury. He made an impact against City, obviously. So it's been so fun to watch him. I had almost forgotten how many of our own guys. I mean, I guess I'd almost forgotten that Saka also made his Champions League debut 2 weeks ago when I was just getting hyped for Martinelli. He's got such a I think he's just got such a game that really suits him for those kind of matches. But he's also just got such a mentality. Like he was everywhere,
Mhm.
just running and running and running. He had 9 recoveries as a winger, which is just ridiculous. Some wingers make 9 recoveries all season. And it's just, I don't know. He seems to just really thrive in those kind of like, this is the time to step up type of situations. I thought he was one of the best players down the stretch last season. Yeah, I'm just so psyched to get to watch him more in the Champions League. Like him at the Emirates in the Champions League, I think he's going to really just have some fun, especially if he keeps getting to play against 37-year-old right backs.
Yeah, no, that was a really good. Yeah, I mean, just Martinelli and Jesus, their combinations in this match were so good. Really, really liked being able to see it. And then I just came away with the impression that Arsenal were better than Sevilla. The 1 goal conceded was a little bit of a bummer because I thought maybe this one deserved a clean sheet for being able to play
Yeah,
through it. So I'm very happy here. So let's look ahead for some of the matches that we do have coming. It's
yeah,
another full week. So we got Sheffield tomorrow, West Ham midweek after that in the Cup, and then a big trip to St. James Park up in Newcastle.
yeah. Well, this is going to be. I think this is going to be a really fun, from like a nerdy perspective. It's going to be a really fun week to watch how Arteta handles it because, I don't expect him to play a really strong lineup at West Ham.
Mhm.
And I don't expect West Ham to either because they've got a league game this weekend. They just had a Europa League game that they had to use some guys in to try and come back, which they failed at. And then they've got another league game next weekend, and then they have to come home and play Olympiacos again. So, I think this is probably both sides' best chance to rotate some guys,
Mhm.
which leads me to think that despite people calling for names like ESR and Vieira for Sheffield, that probably will see the strongest fit team that Arteta can throw out there. So it'll be interesting. And my understanding, although I don't follow Sheffield United religiously, is that they have a lot of health concerns at the moment. So
Yeah, I've
Who
heard
wouldn't love
the
to see
center
a few
backs are
goals?
pretty beaten up right now. So I know they've been playing more of a back five, but it might be interesting to see if they even have enough players to be able to manage something like that.
Yeah, they've and I think just on the whole of their performances have been probably the worst side in the league so far this season. As much as people would like to say that's Luton, I think Sheffield United have been worse. Um, and hey, on the Gooners, like the podcast marathon, I said Heckingbottom would be the first one to get sacked. So let's go Gunners, get them out of there.
Yeah, we all root for our predictions to come true. My Eddie Howe prediction on that podcast is not looking
Yeah,
good.
that didn't turn out well.
Although if he kind of screws up the Champions League, maybe it could be.
Maybe.
They did get beat by Dortmund at home. So that leaves them with just the 4 points because they did get a very, very lucky draw at AC Milan.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're in trouble. So, but yeah, that is the team that we play next week or weekend after next. So Newcastle, they've been weird. So I know there was the double pivot podcast. If you listen to them, they went kind of in depth into what makes them peculiar and how they've been able to accumulate the points and their attacking performances. They are a team that kind of relies on efficiency, both in keeping people away from their own box and then also getting into other teams' boxes and just making the most of their opportunities. Kind of the anti Arsenal right now, where we are not very efficient with our dangerous possession. They have been. So I think it is interesting. So this weekend, Sheffield United, you think it's going to be a pretty strong team? I think let's kind of go through the decision points.
Yeah.
The first one is striker. You going with Eddie? You going with Shard? You bringing Kai up to 9?
Well, I think there's an argument for all of them because I think
Mm-hmm.
that you say I think the argument for Trossard would be something along the lines of, well, he's going to combine better with the wide players. He might
I think you'd say he's the most like for like if we're going to try to have a Gabriel Jesus clone.
100%. And I mean, he does that really well. But he also kind of takes away like a crowded box kind of option if you play him. I think he's got to be like the Jesus and do more midfieldery things as a number 9.
Yeah,
So
I think the one thing that you might say that Jesus does that is kind of what makes him special is that although he's not the biggest guy, he plays like a much bigger guy,
yeah, I mean, he's a
and I
great
don't think
area.
Trossard has that.
Yeah. So then you say, well, okay, if you have a crowded box and you need to kick one up high and have somebody knock it down into the goal, then you say, well, that would be Kai Havertz. But I also think that, like you said earlier, Kai is brought in to be kind of like an additional attacker against these low blocks. So I could see him being in midfield, which
Mhm.
leaves Nketiah, which everyone will groan at if it's an hour before the game and he gets a start. But listen, he keeps getting the starts, and I think that would be my prediction.
Mhm.
I don't know if I would necessarily go with him, but I think in a game when the ball might be doing a lot of bouncing around in the box, that might really suit Eddie because I think when he uh, has to do a lot of like hold up, while he can do a good job at hold up, I think sometimes he makes that turn and takes that shot from the edge of the box, and it's just not his game. Um, I don't know. So I think I probably would go Eddie, and I think Arteta will too. Um,
Yeah.
partly to get Kai a start in midfield and play Rice at 6.
Yeah. So I think the other question is, so we did both pick Odegaard as a disappointment. Is there any thought in your mind that he might get a break here? Or is this too much of a game where we're going to be looking for his potential creativity?
Well, I think it's another interesting one because I can see the argument both ways. I can see, man, he needs a break, but also he needs to get dropped to light a fire under him.
Hmm.
Um, but also, like, I see that his skill set would be valuable in this game, particularly like some of the longer shooting and stuff like that. So, but also, I mean, the guy behind him is Fabio Vieira, and he can do that stuff too.
Yeah.
You put Vieira in Odegaard's role for this game, I think they would be fine. So I'll be really interested to see Arteta's thought process. I personally don't think I would drop him, just because the next game is West Ham, and I am not starting Odegaard in the Carabao Cup at West Ham to try and get him into a rhythm. I'd rather do that in the league. So, I could see it going either way, but probably expect him to start.
Yeah, I think that because the match in midweek is the League Cup, and I think we all expect a pretty heavy rotated side, especially with a looming trip to Newcastle after. I do expect that we'll be strong for this weekend and weaker at midweek to try to give some guys some minutes and being able to keep them involved and engaged. But then really targeting Newcastle way as well as one of those things. Any other changes in midfield, or would you consider, maybe, Declan Rice at left eight again, Jorginho another match? Can Jorginho play 3 matches in a row
Well,
without a break?
I think Arteta's got to think a little bit about in the middle of the week, because if he doesn't, if he hypothetically does play Jorginho, obviously Party will not be around for that game at West Ham. I mean, who would you play deep in the midfield in that game then? That's the question. So I kind of think he has to give Jorginho a rest for this.
We got El Neni coming back, right? It could be
I
El
mean,
Neni, Jorginho.
do we? Has he played any minutes? I have no idea.
No, I don't think so. Has he made a bench yet?
I, I don't know. That's a great question. I'll pull up. Yeah, I mean, he's traveled with the team and stuff, but I don't know if he's been on the bench. So he was on the bench for Sevilla,
Okay.
but
So, yeah, he is potentially available.
potentially available. So who knows? Because if he is available and he can actually play and everything, yeah, throw him out there for that game. That's fine. But Jorginho, I believe, started against Brentford and made an early mistake, but played really well otherwise. So could be a good game for him.
All right. And then into the back line. So I think the main question maybe is at the left back. Is this Takahiro Tomiyasu keeping his spot, or is Zinchenko coming back in?
I don't know. I mean, I think you got to play the hot hand. I don't know that, as much as I love Zinchenko, and it is, I do appreciate him a lot. I think that the reality is Tomiyasu just played his role in a pretty big game and did a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
So I would continue playing him until there's an injury or he loses form or something. But yeah, I think that he just provides a lot when he can play that position and do well.
Right, he's been almost that auxiliary forward that people want too, as well. Like, there was a couple moments in the Sevilla match, and even also in the one against Chelsea, where
Yeah,
he has gotten really far up
Manchester
the
City
pitch,
too.
being able to do it. I thought it was also actually kind of interesting too to kind of see him step into almost the center back role with Gabby moving out to the far left in some of the build up play. So I also think that there's an outside shot that we'll see Tomiyasu here, and maybe you put Zinchenko, because I think again kind of targeting Newcastle. Maybe you think the guys that we want for Newcastle are going to be here, and I think you want Tomiyasu for his dual winning, especially at a big away game, going up against some of the wingers that Newcastle have to be able to solidify that. Not being able to have an easy target like Sterling was able to get against Zinchenko in that first half. So yeah, it'll be a interesting one right before kickoff here.
Yeah, and it's worth. I mean, we'll have another pod before then, but it's also worth noting that another reason to rotate pretty heavily for West Ham is that immediately following Newcastle is the return leg against Sevilla on Tuesday. So yeah, big 2 weeks coming up here. But after that, getting to go, or I think host Burnley. I mean, for all the panicky type of rhetoric and stuff for the injuries, it's a relatively friendly stretch for that.
Yeah, outside of Newcastle, it's a not horrible time of year for Arsenal to be able to go through, because then we got another international break
Yes,
to wait for and interrupt things.
struggle through, have stupid tweets become the topic of every day.
All right. Do you want to talk a little bit of injuries, or is that something that we can do for next week? You don't want to
I think
talk
we'll have
about
to
injury
talk about it.
proneness?
Yeah, I think we'll have to talk about it next week. Well, Scott and I were thinking about talking about this whole concept of like injury prone. I think there's been a lot of really strong language directed toward particularly Party, but also Gabriel Jesus this morning. Maybe one of us can write about that this week too, though.
Yeah, make it a good spot there. I think that's a good spot to leave it. I really enjoyed talking about the quarter season checkup. I like sometimes looking at some of these bigger topics, looking back at things. So that was a great idea by you, Adam. So thank you for that.
I earned my pay for the week, I guess.
I hope you guys all enjoyed it. If you did, you can like and subscribe. Give us the reviews on wherever you listen. Stay up to date with Canon Stats by subscribing to the newsletter. You can follow us on all of the socials at Canon Stats. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you after hopefully a big win that gives everybody into a very, very good mood. We got a good match against Sheffield at home. Hopefully the weather will do good, because one thing that apparently English people never deal with is rain.
I
That
know.
was an interesting thing to hear people complaining about rain on Saturday or last week. If it was from me who lives in the desert, rain complaining about it makes sense. But people that live on a rainy island, you would have expected them to be able to deal with it better.
You may complain about playing on grass, so you're used to the sand.
we have plenty of grass fields here. The wonderful grass fields. All right. I think that's a good spot to end it. Thank you, Adam. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you on the next one.
Sounds good.
Cheers, y'all.